Commerzbank FX strategist. Esther, very good to speak to you. So the last couple of days, we've seen a bit of weakness maybe in the dollar, maybe driven by some of the more risk-on appetite that we're seeing elsewhere. But the direction of travel through much of the summer has been dollar positive, driven by concern around the Delta variant, around Chinese regulation, a host of other concerns driving people into the haven of the dollar. Had the dollar become overvalued? One of our colleagues was writing about irrational exuberance in the dollar yesterday. Did you see, or do you see, dollar overvaluation?
Well, we are moving towards it. I think we do not see much further room for US dollar appreciation, at least not fundamentally justified US dollar appreciation, because of course risk sentiment could always drive US dollar a little bit higher. But you have to keep an eye on interest rate expectations, and they are still very cautious. They hold up during the risk-off move last week. But we are still very cautious, because even if tapering is moving up, it doesn't mean that interest rate hikes are coming up anytime soon. And we think this is what's most important for the US dollar in the medium to long term.
Esther, good morning. Do you think we're a little bit of a kind of binary moment with the dollar? And I say that in the context that we just broke the year-to-date highs. It seemed like at the start of the year when we were at the lows, everyone was bearish to the dollar. Now most people have kind of moved more bullish to the dollar. We had an amazing week of gains, and then yesterday saw the largest drop in the Bloomberg dollar index in more than 3 months. So he's getting extra volatility at kind of this critical point. Do you think there's a chance for a whole new narrative in the dollar to form after Jackson Hole, or are we just going to kind of drift back into the bearish narrative?
Well, that's exactly the kind of sentiment we are seeing right now. We are very cautious on the US dollar. I think a lot of people expect, as soon as tapering is actually announced, whether it will be in Jackson Hole or at the September meeting, we are going to see a new wave of US dollar strength. We are more skeptical, because what we've seen also with last inflation data, this move to always higher inflation has stopped. Inflation numbers are normalizing. We are seeing growth numbers and sentiment normalizing. And I think around the economic fundamental background, this is not the time for further US dollar strength, even if tapering is announced.
Right, so let me ask you what your expectations are then as we move towards Jackson Hole, Esther, as we think about Powell's speech on Friday and what he's likely to signal. Are you looking for things that are going to be dollar positive or dollar negative, given what you just said?
Well, that's a tricky question. In my opinion, it's not Powell's style to move ahead of his central bank colleagues and announce something for example, to give specific clues about tapering. I think he will be more in line with what we've heard about from other Fed central bankers over the last few weeks. Yes, we are moving closer. However, we have to keep an eye on the spread of the Delta variant and vaccination rates. And I assume that he'll focus more on the economic outlook, maybe be a little bit cautious, but still signal that the Fed is, of course, moving towards tapering. And I think given, Powell's leadership style, it's more likely that he'll announce the specific time frame for tapering at a usual Fed meeting.
If your kind of base case is that we're going to go back into, dollar's reaching the end of its kind of appreciation, we're going to go back into a little bit more of a depreciation trend, what would be the currency you'd most like to play that for going in the end of the year? Which currency against the dollar?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Well, there are still some candidates, in particular in the G10 space, which are looking at much more specific ways and starting normalization. I mean, there's specific focus on the Norwegian krone, of course, which could see further appreciation. But of course, this has all been thrown a little bit into question over the last week in particular. So this is also hitting on the Delta variant becoming less of a focus topic over the next few weeks. This week, it looks like this is actually going to happen, and I think then we are also going to see some further appreciation in the Norwegian krone, in the Canadian dollar, maybe, because those central banks are much closer to an actual normalization that is necessary to support the currency longer term.
Esther, thanks very much. Stay with us. Esther Reichelt, Commerzbank FX strategist, with us this morning on the